Hello. Today in my storytelling playlist, I'm going to talk about two needle nightmares in Asia. What I mean by that is these two stories both have to do with needles. And they're quite different stories, but I'll get into it right away and we'll see where it goes. But the first story takes place a year after I came to Korea, which would have been 2010 because I came here in 2009. On my way back home to America, the first time, I was meeting a friend in Vietnam who I had met in Korea, and he moved to Vietnam. So on my way back, we were talking about doing a short trip where I would meet him in Vietnam, and then him and I would go overland from Vietnam to Cambodia to Thailand. I think it was like a 10-day trip or something. Very fast. It was my first kind of experience in Southeast Asia. It was more of kind of a, I don't want to say a vacation because it wasn't really like that, but my first kind of taste of the East outside of Korea. And if you know anything about South Korea, I would say Korea is most like the United States of all the countries out here. I mean, maybe Japan has elements that are similar, but all the countries in Southeast Asia are much different than the US. So it was a bit of a culture shock trip, but it was very exciting. And at some point, I'm going to tell a different story from this trip, but for today I'm going to focus on an experience where I got a tattoo. So we went on our trip, and we eventually ended up in Bangkok, and that was where I was going to leave from. And my friend was like, we should get a tattoo. And I was, well, okay. I had two before that, and they were both done with a gun, and I didn't like it. I'm not really into pain that much, and I also have a very strong fear of needles from my childhood. When I was a kid, I had mono, and I had to get a bunch of blood tests every day for several weeks, so I developed this kind of irrational fear of needles. But two other times in my life, I decided to get a tattoo. The first time, the tattoo was very small, so it didn't really affect me that much. The second time, though, it was a bigger tattoo on my arm, and it was a very hot day, and I ended up passing out during the tattoo. I fainted. And that was not the first time that I fainted from a needle prick. When I was in high school, I got my ear pierced, and I fainted after that as well. So I had kind of a habit of that happening. Even if I would cut myself, if it bled enough, I would feel kind of queasy, and I would either faint or have to lie down. So I was a little apprehensive when he said it. He's like, no, it's like a magic tattoo, and I'm into magic, so I was more curious then. And he was saying that, the monks in Thailand, I think it's called Yak Sant or Yak Saint. I don't know how to say that exactly, but I'll put the name on the screen here. And it's supposed to be a situation where you get one tattoo. The first one is a magical spell for protection, which is at the sort of base of the spine of your neck, right, or where your neck and your spine meet. And then once you have that, there are kind of different ones you can get for different powers, let's say, that kind of spread out from that first one. And then, if you're in Thailand, you see some of the guys with their shirts off, their whole back is covered, or sometimes it even comes around, or there's just many tattoos that they can get, and they're all supposed to have their own kind of certain magical power. But once he told me that, he kind of convinced me, even though I was still a bit apprehensive. And we had to find a way to get to this temple because it was outside of the city, and we ended up convincing this taxi driver to take us out there. We pooled our money together, and it wasn't really that expensive to get him to come there, even though he had to wait for us to finish. And as we were doing it, as we were headed out there, we started chatting with him a bit more, and we kind of had a good time with him. Like, it was very fun. And so we got there at this temple, and it was quite early in the morning. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning by the time we got there, and we walked in, and there was already like a line of people. There were like maybe 12 people waiting. And when I say people, I mean all men. There were 12 men. And they were all like mid-20s to early 30s maybe. It was odd situation because the monk was on this kind of like wooden platform that was raised up above the ground, maybe about a foot. And he was sitting kind of Indian style, and the person that was getting the tattoo was on the floor in front of him. So he was up higher than the person a little. And what he would do is they had this like instrument. I'll put it on the screen so you can see what it looks like. And he would dip the instrument into the ink, and that's how he would do the tattoo. And so as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no. Because, a gun made me faint. I can't imagine, getting this thing. It's going to take an hour or something of this guy banging on my back. So right off the bat, I was very, very nervous. But my friend was very gung-ho, and we actually convinced the taxi driver to get one also. So the taxi driver was waiting there with us, and he was going to get one. So we got in line, and eventually the monk was kind of, even though there was a line, he was making kind of choices of who would go next. And sometimes he would skip people in the line and get them to go do something, or, he had some kind of ulterior motive. But eventually my friend went up there, and I was watching, and it didn't look too bad, so my nervousness kind of came down a little. But I kept thinking my turn was going to be next, and then, it didn't happen, and then the taxi driver went, and I'm like, well, where am I going to go? And I met eyes with the monk, and I could tell like he didn't want me to go for some reason. I don't know why, but he didn't. So eventually he like made this gesture to this other monk, and this guy came over, and he spoke a bit of English, and he's like, you need to help me. And I'm like, okay. So he led me to this other part of the temple, and he put on like a workman's belt, like you would wear if you're going to do some housework or like install something. And it had a bunch of hammers and, different tools in it. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. He starts smoking a cigarette, which I also thought was interesting. And he kind of points to his cell phone, which is interesting also. Like, none of it was what I expected. When my friend said we're going to this temple, and this was my first experience at a temple in Asia, I sort of had this other idea, I guess. But, they were basically living like we live, just cloistered in this place. So, it was smoking, there was the cell phone, all this stuff. So he wants me to help him with this ladder. And so I end up carrying this ladder over to this pole, and he, he puts the ladder on there, and he kind of motions that he's going to climb up, and then I need to hold the ladder. I'm like, okay. So I'm holding the ladder. He goes up to the phone lines, and he starts doing a bunch of stuff with the phone lines. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he's like doing cable, like for TV or, whatever. I don't know. So this goes on and on for a while. And eventually it's like lunchtime, and the monks kind of take a break for lunch, and you can go and eat there and stuff. So we eat there, and my friend's like, when do you think you're gonna be able to go? Because we should probably go pretty soon. I'm like, I don't know. He hasn't said yet. And so we're like, well, after lunch, try to get in line like at the beginning of the line so we can get out of here. I'm like, okay. So I finished my lunch early, and then I went to get in the beginning of the line, and again he was like making me wait for some reason. And finally, I mean, we were probably there for 6 hours, maybe. He finally let me go, and he did it, and it was pretty intense. The pain was definitely intense, but it's such a weird experience because you're sitting there, this guy's like putting this needle in your back. You don't know how sanitary it is, if it's sanitary at all. You don't know like if it's been cleaned before he did it with the other people. There are like mongrel dogs like underneath the platform that are kind of growling occasionally, so it's like kind of putting you off, like it was a very stressful experience. But there was also something very like mystical about it, the ordeal aspect of it, and the strength and the mental fortitude of sticking through it to the end. And eventually it finished, and I don't know, like I wonder, I like to think that it did give me some kind of magic power. I don't know. There have been lots of situations in Asia where my life was threatened, either like on a motorbike or, during the whole pandemic time, like all these different things, and somehow I'm still here. So I'm thanking the protection tattoo. I don't know if it is or not, but it was a life-changing experience, I'd say. The second story is in Korea, and it's a little bit different. When you work at an academy in Korea, in South Korea, there are kind of two kinds. You can work for a school, which in that case you work usually in the morning and into the afternoon, or you can work for what they call a hagwon, which is like an after-school academy. And I work at a hagwon, the after-school academy, and this would have been probably my fourth contract in Korea, so right around 2014 or 15. And I had worked at this place for a while, so I already had kind of a rapport with them. But Koreans don't like taking sick days. They're like really against taking sick days. To the point where it's quite comical what they will do so to make someone not have a sick day. So anyway, I got sick. I got the flu, and I got the flu really bad, and I could barely even stand up to get out of my bed. And so I called my wanjangnim, which is the word for like director or boss, I guess. And I said that I probably can't come to school today. I'm super sick, really sick. And so she talked to there's a husband and wife, and he said he's going to come take me to the hospital. I'm like, well, okay. In America, when you're ill, let's say just like with a cold or the flu or something, it's very rare for us to go to the hospital. But they were like insistent that I went to the hospital. So I was like, okay, you're going to have to come here. I'll try to get dressed. It's going to be hard because I can barely stand up. So he comes there short amount of time after. I feel really bad. I'm throwing up and I'm very weak, and it was quite an ordeal just to get my clothes on to be ready to go. But I did it, and I got into his car. It took a lot to even get in the car because I kept getting winded, And, you know, when you have the flu, like your joints ache a lot and stuff. So I was definitely not in the right physical condition to be doing all that. But I got into the car, and so what I'm thinking is, oh, he's going to take me to this hospital. They're going to give me some medicine. The doctor's going to sign off, and then I'm just going to go home and go back to sleep, right, for the day until I get better. That's what I thought. So he starts driving, and I'm like thinking, yeah, I think the hospital is that way. And so I'm just kind of watching, going, where is he taking me? And so we go in the complete opposite direction of the hospital. And I'm like, okay. And so finally I mentioned, I'm like, are you taking me to the hospital? He's like, oh, I know a really good clinic. I'm going to take you to this clinic instead. And so I'm thinking, well, that might even be better than the hospital because I don't have to go through, you know, the hospital's very big. And, you know, if it's a clinic, maybe I can just jump out of the car and get in there quick and get out. That's what I'm thinking. But we get there, and it's very small, and I look at the sign, it says Oriental Medicine Clinic in English, and I'm like, okay. So we go in, and we have to wait a little bit, and there's like this couch, and I'm just like collapsed on this couch because I can barely even sit up. And this doctor comes out and says, you know, you'll have to take, he has like a couple of bottles and all these packs of pills. And he's like, you're going to have to take this stuff. Usually they would give you kind of a prescription and you would go to a pharmacist. But I think some of this stuff was like handmade, or I don't know. But they had it there. So I don't really understand that, but it was. They also gave me a piece of paper with other things that I would get from the pharmacy later. But I do specifically remember a couple of strange bottles that he gave me. Anyway, I thought that was going to be it. And he's like, no, you have to come back and we're going to take physical. I'm like, okay. So in Korea, when you go to any hospital or clinic or whatever, you have to take all your clothes off and put on a robe, no matter what it is. Even if you're just getting your blood pressure checked, you still have to do that. So they took me into this room where there was like lockers and stuff, and I changed into this stuff. And the other funny thing is foreigners are much bigger than Koreans, so all the clothes were like a little bit too small. And the sandals were too small as well. So like I'm trying to walk through this place with too small of sandals, and the robe is too small and everything. And he takes me to this room, and then I realize that I'm going to be getting acupuncture. I was like, whoa, what? And they're like, okay, lie down and flip over onto your back. And I'm like, okay. And so they give me acupuncture. They stick a bunch of needles in me in all these different places. And it's hellish. I did not like it at all. You know, based upon my previous experiences with needles, I thought I was going to faint. I did not faint somehow, even though I had many, many needles inside of me. And, you know, he said, we're fixing your alignment or something. I'm like, okay. He had to kind of translate that. And I'm like, okay. And so it was just a really hellish experience. It took a long time. And eventually all the needles came out. And my boss was like, oh, you know, acupuncture is very good. And I'm like thinking, for the flu? I'm not really sure, you know. And, you know, I had to take all the clothes back off, get my clothes on, get back in the car. We went to the pharmacy, all the rest. I get home, I'm sicker than I was before I got, you know, there. I don't know, you know, if the acupuncture helped or not. I have no idea. But I know I was sick for like 4 days, and the last 3 days of it, I actually had to go to the school because they wouldn't give me the day off. So I was basically like propped up in this chair trying to teach, like, you know, where I was like, not like the third and the fourth day, but the second day I was definitely like not 100% at all. I mean, even the third and fourth day I was maybe at 60 or 70%, but like the second day, I mean, I could barely stand up. And they're like, oh, it's okay. As long as you're in a chair, it's okay. Just keep teaching. I'm like, what? So that was like one of the first times in Korea where I was like, oh my God, like I'm never going to be sick again. And strangely, I've done a very good job of not calling in sick ever again. I've had a cold a couple of times and whatever, but I think that was the last time I had the flu. So that was over 10 years ago. Well, about 10 years ago. But yeah, maybe something in my physiology is like, no, I don't ever do that again. So like, I will not get the flu again. I don't know. But yeah, that was my second needle experience in Asia. If you like anything you see here, you can like and subscribe, but that's about all I got for today. Take care. Have a good day.